Hi there, this is Catherine with Unfolded Heart Music. Welcome back to Lyre Foundations. Today we are going to begin Chapter 3. This is the last chapter of Part 1 in the Lyre Foundations course, and this has a lot to do with expressiveness and musicality in playing, really kind of elevating your music to kind of the next level. So today we're going to begin that first chapter. It is chapter, not the first chapter, the first lesson, of course, is lesson 1 of chapter 3. We're going to be focusing on dynamics today, and I hope that these exercises and explanations help to kind of fill out some of those gaps maybe that come with just reading the book. So let's get started. All right, so first let's begin with just a general overview of what this chapter is all about. This chapter, as I mentioned a moment ago, really is meant to sort of elevate your playing. Once you have your fingers really kind of strengthened and some good coordination in there, even if you're not a master at that, that will always improve. But once you have that at a certain basic level of comfort and coordination, then I would really encourage you to take a look at this chapter in order to add a bit more musicality to what you're playing. So there are 3 lessons in this chapter. The first is what we'll be focusing on today, which is simply playing with dynamics. This second lesson is in regards to shaping that music and how to really, again, be really expressive when you're playing with dynamics, but also with tempo in conjunction with that on certain pieces. And then the third lesson is on different articulations and muting the strings. So I'll explain that, of course, when we get there. So those are the 3 lessons. All of these really have to do with listening. At the very, very beginning of this course, I talked about kind of the approach to both teaching and learning, and one of those had to do with listening. We haven't really focused on this quite as much because we've needed to focus on learning something with our mind, teaching our hands to coordinate and to know what we really want them to do. So kind of connecting those two, our mind and our hands. And now we're going to be focusing on what we hear. And this is, in my opinion, kind of a really fun part. It's also maybe a bit more tempting to use our heads more than our ears because we kind of maybe can feel like we have more control over it, or we're nervous that we're not doing it right. So I suppose my encouragement for this chapter in general is to relax and to enjoy the music and to allow the intuitive part of your musicality as a person to have some more space to come out. And then, of course, just to listen to what you're playing and to adapt that so that your intuition and what you're hearing really kind of align. So it's very broadly what we're going to be talking about in this chapter. And so we're going to start today with playing with dynamics. Let's go and take a pause for that, and then I'll come back with a few words about this specific lesson. All right, so today, again, our focus is on playing with dynamics. If you're not familiar with what dynamics are or the notation, how we write that into sheet music, this is the same suggestion as I gave earlier, but go ahead and check out Part 2. It'll be Chapter 4 in Part 2, it will, I can't remember exactly which lesson it is, but there's a specific lesson on dynamics. Take a look at that to help familiarize yourself before moving forward with this. It'll make a little bit more sense. Okay, so just a couple of general tips and suggestions before we get into the actual practice exercises, which aren't technically very difficult, really in contrast to what we just done, but a couple things to keep in mind. So the first thing is that you want your tone quality to remain good as you go throughout. It sounds like a sort of a silly thing to say, but especially on either end of the dynamic range, when we're playing really quietly or when we're playing really loudly, it can be sort of tempting to not really have great tone on that. So I'll illustrate what that means, but you don't want it to be kind of tinny or dingy at the lower end, and you don't want it to be buzzing or just kind of too much on the upper end. You want it to be really beautiful on both ends of that. So that's going to vary with your particular lyre. Keep that in mind as well as we're going through this particular lesson. The build, the size, the structure, all of that of your lyre is going to impact, and your strings as well, is going to impact your capacity to utilize dynamics. So make sure that you're working with your specific lyre. Okay, so tone quality, keep that nice no matter where you are in the dynamic range. The second thing is Well, just in general, when you're playing with two hands, your melodic line, which is usually going to be that top line, for me it's going to be my right hand, that's going to be a little bit louder than my left hand, than those lower notes. Because the lower notes are written in and are just sort of designed to support the melodic line, and you don't want them to all be on the same dynamic level. Even though they're going to kind of move together. When one increases, the other will also increase. Same with decreasing. But in general, you want that melodic line to be a little bit louder than the harmonic line. The next suggestion is that when you're doing these practice exercises, to do it with different fingers. It can be sort of tempting to just use your two finger to work on this. So do it with each finger, each hand, so you get some nice comfort with that. You're probably going to be using more of your right hand to do the more minute and kind of very small and particular dynamic changes, but I still think it's worth using multiple fingers just to get some practice there. Okay, and then finally, you can also adjust these exercises just like with any of the exercises, but one suggestion for that adjustment is to practice with chords rather than just a single note. Okay, and I'll illustrate a few of these in context in just a moment. So let's go ahead and look at the practice exercises and see what this looks like in context. Okay, looking at page 35 now, we've got 6 different exercises. I read that wrong. And, it really doesn't need a whole lot of explanation on some of this. Especially that first part. On page 36, we're going to have something a little bit different there, where we have both hands. But these first exercises in part 1 of the practice is really meant to help you familiarize yourself with the lyre. And of course, there's different ways to do that. But for example, we start off in exercise 1 just by moving from softest to loudest. And we do this not with a gradualness, but I've marked it such that you should move quite starkly from one to the other. So, for example, in the first measure, we're looking at a piano volume, a piano dynamic, and we want our first note and that last note, that 8th note, there's 8 of them there, we want that to be the same volume. Okay, and before we even start with this, I would again experiment with what can your lyre actually do. And so, for example, for my piano, I'll use what do I have? A. Okay, I've got this A up here. If I want to do piano, I don't want to do it where it's really wispy. That's very quiet, and maybe it has a place in a certain way if you're wanting a wispy sound. Maybe at the very end of the piece, you might just barely hit a string. But there's almost no fullness to that note. So a piano level, I would recommend something more like this. And I'm not sure how much of a difference you can hear with that, but there's just more purposefulness in the way that I play it, and there really is quite a bit of a difference in the tonal quality. I would also recommend actually not doing it the way I just did it, but because you're not usually going to just have one finger on the lyre, and you don't have a lot of control over that, especially as we get louder. It's a much harder to control. So I would go ahead and have probably your 1 and 3, at least your 1, maybe not your 3, on the lyre as you're doing this, to give it a nice basis, your 2 a nice basis as you go. I am still pushing in on the string, not a lot, but still I am doing that some. And then we'll go a little bit louder. The other thing we're working on in this first exercise is consistency of that dynamic as we move through all 8 of these notes. And that's a little bit tougher. So then we'll go a little bit louder at mezzo forte. And finally forte. Okay, now on this other end, the forte and the very loud end, let me illustrate what I mean by good tone quality. You don't want to, first of all, you don't want to be just grabbing the string. And I actually, I'm sort of hesitant to do it, but certainly if you hear any buzzing, it's not good for your lyre. Don't do that. But you also just don't want it to be obnoxious. You don't want to be playing Again, I'm not sure how much the microphone is picking up, but just make sure it's really pleasing to the ear. You can still do something really nice. That's still quite loud for the lyre, but it's not like you're sort of banging on your audience's ear. So again, for both of these, on the upper end and the lower end, use your judgment, make it beautiful, and don't lose your strength and all of kind of the good habits that you've been forming in the rest of this course. So that would be the other recommendation, is make sure that you're still doing all the things that we've talked about before. Okay, and then with different fingers, we'll do it with a 3. Again, I would probably put your 1 on here. And get louder. And then forte. You can do it with your thumb. Just kind of discover the range of your lyre. And then, of course, your left hand too. Etc. Okay, so in exercises 1 through 6, I'm really going to leave that in your hands because it's pretty self-explanatory. We do different things. We go from softer to louder, sometimes gradually, sometimes not. We go from louder to softer, and then we go up and down. For example, in exercises, let's see, 4, 5, and 6, we do different ranges. So for example, exercise 6 has the biggest range, where we want to go from really quiet to really loud to really quiet to really loud to really quiet. As with everything, keep the speed slow. It's not your focus. If you go too fast, it's going to be hard to develop the kind of control that we're looking for here. Okay, let's go ahead and flip the page here. Let me move this over a little bit. We're on page 36 now. You know what, let's take a break. Let's take a pause real quick. Again, do that with all your fingers on left hand and right hand. Enjoy it, have fun, and then come back when you're ready to start putting some hands together. This is the part 2 of the practice exercises. Okay, now looking at part 2 of the practice, these are not really in a particular order in regards to difficulty, so just take a look and see what's going to be easiest or more straightforward for you. Exercise 1 is definitely the easiest, excuse me, and then there's other things like exercise 3 is not particularly difficult, but it does have some chords in there, and it's 3 notes rather than 2. Exercise 4 has 2 notes instead of 3 in the chords. So yeah, just so you know that that's not in a particular order of difficulty. But what we're trying to do here is now integrate two-handed playing with dynamics and even multiple notes, not just because there's 2 hands, but because we've got some chords. And this gives you kind of a foundation also of what you can try in the music also that you're learning. That's kind of the 3rd step, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But this gives you an idea of how to kind of be creative and continue to play with it, even if you're not using these particular 6 exercises. These are just some examples. Okay, so one thing I want to illustrate is maybe on 2, maybe 3, we'll see, some examples of the balance between the right hand and the left hand. So let's look at exercise 1 because it's very simple. Okay, I'm going to use my thumb on my 1 on this for my right hand and my 1, 2, 3 on my left hand. So my left hand is going to be a bit quieter because I don't want it to drown out the right hand. Now, I mean, musically speaking, really the left hand has a more melodic line because it moves a lot more than the right hand, but we're going to pretend like that's not the case because I want to work on the right hand, that higher note, higher pitch being a bit louder. It naturally will be in the sense of higher pitches tend to hit our ear at a more audible range in a certain sense than the lower notes. So it will already have that kind of built in, you could say, but be listening for that. Okay, so we're just going to be moving from piano to mezzo piano, mezzo forte to forte. And again, let's do this nice and slow so that we can really focus on this. So we'll start at piano, a little louder, louder, and forte. Okay, you could also do that backwards. You could start with forte, mezzo forte, mezzo piano, piano. Okay. Number 2 has the crescendos in there, so this is a more gradual rather than kind of stair-stepping it down, a more gradual increase. Again, you could do that backwards. Let's jump though to, let's actually do exercise 4, and then we'll do exercise 3 because this has some chords in there. The left hand just stays the same. We've just got this nice chord. But again, listen for the balance. Even though we're increasing in volume, let's listen to the balance between the right hand and the left hand. So we're going to be going from mezzo piano gradually up to, starting at piano. I think I said mezzo piano. Starting at piano, going up to mezzo piano gradually, back down to piano, up to mezzo piano, down to piano again. Okay, so it won't be a huge difference, but yeah, hopefully you'll be able to hear that. Okay, nice and slow. Let's do that again. I want to do that a little bit better, actually. And I want to slow it down quite a bit for you. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that left hand is still supporting the right hand, but it does get louder and softer as I move through those dynamic markings. All right, let's look now finally at exercise 3. This is a little bit more complicated because we have both hands moving. We'll have our 1 chord, and then we'll move up to, the 4 chord, back down to 1 chord, down to 5 chord, and back up to 1 chord. Okay, that's the left hand, and we'll start at forte and go all the way down to pianissimo. So that's even quieter than piano. We've got these eighth notes in the right hand, just going, let's do this. So really only working on 3 notes, but repeated a lot. Okay, so we're going to start loud and go quieter. Again, listen to, even though we've got 3 times as many notes in the left hand than the right hand, it still should not overpower the right hand. So let's give this a shot. Okay, I goofed on the first time. I didn't do all 8 notes. I did 4 notes instead. So I'm going to give this another shot here. All right, here we go. Starting real loud, and we're going to go slow. Okay, and go ahead and work that through. I think that one of the most challenging parts of that is that because you have 8 notes and you're only going down a little bit between each one, it's a little bit hard to get that gradualness into it. So, okay, and you can go ahead and work through the rest of those. Let's go ahead and have just a few final thoughts about maybe one more thing that you could do if you're really trying to work on dynamics here. All right, so I'm really hoping that you can hear, at least to a certain extent, those differences in the lyre. I think you should because you can on the music albums themselves. So, but again, enjoy it, have fun, listen very, very closely, a very relaxed way to add some musicality to whatever you're working on, these practices at first. But then that third part would be to go ahead and take whatever song you're working on and play with the dynamics, exaggerate them even more than maybe you would actually do it. Maybe it doesn't quite sound realistic to expand it a certain way, but just for practice to help your hands and your ear and your mind to really come together to understand how to give it that really big dynamic range. Just practice giving it that exaggeration, and you'll have a better idea of how to do that in a more nuanced way as you move forward. As always, if you have any questions, if there's anything I can help you with, feel free to reach out via email or in the comments below. Thank you so much. God bless you, and may the peace of Christ be with you.